Tales from the wild. Stories from the heart. A journey into the mind and soul of fired-up business professionals where they share their vision for the future. And hear from a different non-profit organization every month as they create awareness of their goals and their needs. Dive into a world of untamed passion as we join our host, Shireen Buerta, for this month's episode of Friends from Wild Places.
Well, hello there and welcome. Shireen here. I am your virtual boutique bookkeeper and QuickBooks advisor. Are you tired of boring bookkeeping that feels like just another chore? Well, welcome to Shireen's Bookkeeping Services, where numbers meet creativity. Now, what sets me apart, you may ask? It's my unique approach. I combine meticulous accuracy with a personal touch, offering customized solutions that fit your business needs. With my innovative tools, bookkeeping becomes engaging and understandable. Say goodbye to the dull financial statements and hello to insight. Are you a business owner that never hears from your bookkeeper? Well, email me today. And if you want to know more, why don't you go check me out at shireensbookkeeping.com and allow me to keep your books clean so you don't have to. Welcome back, listeners. You are listening to Friends from Wild Places with myself, Shireen, and my most beautiful co-host, Tanya. Tanya, how are you doing? What's going on?
Hello, Shireen. Doing great here in Miami, trying to weather the cold. We had a cold front come in, so anything under 70 degrees, you have all the Floridians running wild. So you'd never know I was born and raised in Connecticut, but I'm happy to be here and super excited to have our guest here today. So we have Miss Terri, and I'm going to turn it back over to you, Shireen, and then you can do a formal introduction.
Well, Tanya, if you don't mind just taking a few minutes just to tell our listeners a little bit more about the subscription for extra content, if they want to get more involved with us, that'd be great.
Sure. So at Friends from Wild Places podcast, we have a paid subscription for as little as $5 a month. And you can get the raw, unedited material on topics that we dive a little bit deeper in. So if you have any requests that you would like us to dive deeper on a subject that maybe you're interested in, or check out what we have available. We've been doing these podcasts for, Shireen, is it almost 5 years? It's going on quite a few years. How many years is it? 4,
It's
5?
3 at this point. We're
Oh,
going
3.
on the
Okay.
fourth. Crazy.
I probably have known you for 5. I think that's what it is.
It's
So
been a while.
yeah, yeah. So we do these podcasts once a month, and we get them out on all social platforms, including YouTube. So again, if you are interested in joining a paid subscription, feel free to do so, and you can donate more if you'd like. But for as little as $5 a month, you can have topics that you want more information on.
Oh, thank you, Tanya. Yeah, listeners, it's worth it. If you want to come and listen to us a little bit more, we'd love to have you. This is a safe space for everybody here. So, Terri Chaplin, wow, she is a grief companion and educator. Her heart is in walking alongside those who are grieving. After experiencing a deep personal loss in her own life, she realized that grief doesn't need to be rushed or fixed. It needs to be witnessed, honored, and held with compassion. For over 6 years, she's been holding space for others in their grief through private sessions, group settings, retreats, and through her writing. She believes healing begins when we feel safe enough to be seen in our own pain. Her approach is very gentle, heart-centered, and rooted in presence. She doesn't give quick fixes or forces timelines. She simply walks beside others wherever they are in their journey. She also trains others to do this sacred work through her accredited Healing Heart certification program and other grief-informed training for professionals who desire to better understand grief and provide a safe, sensitive, and effective support to those they serve in times of loss. It's so good to have you on the show, Terri. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. So I appreciate the invitation to come and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. So thank you both for having me.
Yeah,
We can't
it's
wait. We can't wait. We're so
mm,
excited, Terry. Yeah, this is a great way, I think, to kind of, go into the new year in 2026 with maybe a different perspective on a topic that, resonates with everybody from different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions. But grief is central to humanity. So we're really interested in taking it a deep dive into your work and what you do and how we can support you on your mission.
yeah,
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
yeah. Well said, Tanya. Absolutely, Terry. We were looking forward to this conversation. But let's break a little bit of the ice, right? It's the month of love, February. Tanya and I are true crime enthusiasts. We love to chat about some of the latest true crimes that are undergoing trials. And one of them is the Jonathan Gerlach trial. Listeners, if you don't know much about Jonathan Gerlach, in January 2026, he was arrested in connection with a series of grave robberies at the historic Mount Moriah Cemetery, which spans southwest Philadelphia and Yadon, Pennsylvania area. The case has been described by Delaware County District Attorney Tanner Rouse as the horror movie come to life. Here, let's just chat about some of the summary facts so we can get into it. So, regarding the investigation and the arrest, they had to stake out what was going on first because following a 2-month investigation into cemetery burglaries, police conducted surveillance on January 6. They spotted Gerlach's car with bones and skulls visible in the back seat. When they caught him, detectives observed Gerlach exiting the cemetery with a crowbar and a burlap bag. Inside the bag, they found mummified remains of 2 children, 3 skulls, and other bones. He also left a digital trail, which was also evidence held against him. Investigators linked Gerlach to the site using license plate readers and cell phone records. Tips also pointed towards his social media activity, where he allegedly participated in human bones and skull selling groups. So, upon searching Gerlach's home and storage unit, authorities discover over 100 sets of human remains. I mean, we're talking, as I said, from human skulls, mummified hands, decomposing human torsos, jewelry and a pacemaker still attached to some remains, and many more. The legal status and charges right now is Gerlach admitted to stealing at least 30 sets of remains from Mount Moriah, but is facing nearly 575 charges, including 100 counts of abuse of a corpse, 100 counts of theft, and 26 counts of burglary, multiple counts of desecration of venerated objects, historical burial sites. So it's quite an interesting case, I must be honest. The question that I want to ask us here and for the listeners to think about is in the wake of the Gerlach discovery, where should the law draw the line between dark hobbyist collecting and criminal desecration? And does our current lack of regulation on the oddities market effectively provide a shield for people to hide these types of crimes in plain sight? Because, yeah, it is quite interesting, the route that this specific case has gone down. So, go ahead, Terri. Do you want to give us your opinion?
Sure. Yeah. So I found it to be extremely grueling. Nothing I'd ever heard of or read about before. But I think that it it there's a line being crossed when it's an obvious lack of respect for someone's loved ones. There's no consent being given or going in and breaking into these vaults or into the grave sites and stealing the remains. And I feel like the lack of, you know, regulations in the oddities market definitely makes it easy, because I was floored. How can there be a group where people are selling and buying human remains? Like I don't know how that's possible. So I feel like there's obviously um, some things that need to change, and more regulation and oversight that needs to be done, so that these people, that's not a dark hobby when you're, you don't have consent to dig up these or break into these vaults. That's theft and breaking and entering, and just morally wrong. So I feel
Yeah.
like there definitely needs to be some rules and regulations in place, because there should have been red flags that there's a group that is selling. I'm sure that group he was in is probably not the only group. So
Right.
yeah, I think more definitely needs to be done, in this case is a prime example of that,
Right.
and why.
Yeah, right. But I mean, even there's some career paths that actually use body parts for education purposes. But I think you need to get permission, which is why I want to hear Tanya's point of view here. Tanya, go ahead. What do you think about this whole case and what's going
Yeah,
on?
I serve as expert witness quite regularly for attorneys. So here in the United States, each state is regulated differently. So each state has its own rules and regulations. So currently, I am a licensed funeral director embalmer in the state of Florida. And I serve on many, many cases of this nature, all kinds of abuse of corpse, mutilation of a corpse, grave robberies. So what happens is, there is, as you mentioned, Shireen, there is a very dark side of, I want to say, humanity that thrive in the oddities world, where body parts are being sold, all kinds of things, jewelry, human remains, animal remains, and it's not that it's not regulated. I mean, if people, but it's kind of like, there's this group, I mean, and I even hear it in the classroom discussion, teaching mortuary science, that some of the students have a fascination for, interesting things. Now, where it draws the line is, one thing can have a curiosity for perhaps, like, interesting things, interesting items. But when you actually go and take things that don't belong to you or desecrate a human being, that's where the law steps in. So
Mhm.
for in Florida, we are operating under Chapter 497, which is our state statute. So if I get assigned a legal case, I have to become familiar with all the findings, go through the state statutes, and then I get hired as an expert witness. So in this specific case, it's out of the jurisdiction of Florida, but nonetheless, it for whatever reason somebody is doing that, whether they're even if they are working in a funeral home setting, cemetery setting, or for their own morbid curiosity going to rob graves, there are penalties that are quite serious. Some are felony charges. So each state is operating differently. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, and how many people are kind of brought in, for this kind of underground. But I remember, I think it was a year or two ago, even Harvard Medical School, their morgue attendant was, that was public knowledge, was selling body parts. So, I mean, so sometimes people are in the field, sometimes they're not. But again, there are laws to protect the deceased. There are laws to speak for the voiceless, which is my mission in life. So I am hoping that, the wrongdoings, there is penalty for that.
Right. I agree. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's a fascinating trial. So if you want to, listeners, stay tuned, go check out Law and Crime, Crime TV. They're all covering it. It is quite an interesting trial. So follow that. But back to you, Terry. It is that part of the podcast which is so important. It's the quote of the day. So today, Terry shared with us a really close quote to her heart, and it's only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. Let me say that again. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. And that's from Brené Brown. And what does this mean to you, Terry?
Well, for me personally, it I think it's really important and something that I instill in my clients and I show up every day and talk about is the need to really give your grief the attention that it requires. Because I hear so many times people say, "Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm keeping busy. I'm staying busy with work. I'm doing this, I'm doing that." And that doesn't work.
Hmm.
Um, Grief is very real. It has very real physical and emotional effects on us. And when it is knocking on the door, I feel like it's important that we sit with our grief. We have to give ourselves permission to just stop, focus on ourselves, give ourselves permission to sit and let the emotions come and let them flow. And that takes courage. It's scary to some people. They don't want to sit with it, and they'll say, "Oh, no, I can't think about it. I can't let myself go there." But it's imperative that you let yourself go there. You have to let yourself go there because it's when you go there that you see the beauty of what can come from loss. And for me personally, I feel like it wasn't until I recognized that I had to really allow myself to accept and explore the emotions that were coming from some of my own losses that I was able to grow from those experiences and my true light come out. I say, losing my son was the greatest teacher of my life. And he taught me more lessons in his passing than he ever did, when he was alive. And it's so true. But if we don't afford ourselves the opportunity to do that, we won't have the opportunity to see the beauty that can come from it or the light at the end of the tunnel, if you will.
Yeah,
Mm, mm.
that's so
Terry,
good.
do you mind walking us through your journey as far as how you come to be who you are today, like based on your losses? Like how did your light shine? Like what was that journey like for you? So for those of us that know maybe parts of the story, but our listeners who probably maybe are not familiar with you and your work, can you share with us your journey about what your mission has become?
Sure. It really started, the first major loss that I had in my life was in 2005. My first husband, Troy, he had been sick for about 5.5 years with renal failure, and he'd undergone 2 kidney transplants and was in the process, both of them failed. He was in the process of getting a third from a cadaver donor, and he passed away completely unexpected. He was on dialysis, but he had some complications, and so he passed away. And that was my first really hard loss. I had lost my grandparents, but I became the head of my household, the only parent to our son Tyler, and so my life completely changed. And at the time, I didn't realize that I wasn't really addressing my grief, if you will. I was focused on Tyler. My son, he took it really hard. He was 10 at the time, and he really struggled with losing his dad, especially at the age of 10. It was just an extremely vulnerable time with him. And he had so much hope for his dad getting better because, he spent 5 years seeing him sick, and there were so many things they weren't able to do together. And he always operated on the hope that dad's going to get a transplant and he's going to be better, and we're going to be able to play ball together, and we're going to be able to do all these things that, fathers and sons are supposed to do. And so he was heartbroken, and I focused my attention on getting care for him. I did go through my employee assistance program and tried getting some support for myself, but I never really found anything or anyone that resonated with me. I went to 2 or 3 different therapists at the time, and it just, I never felt like they really understood what I was going through, and it didn't seem to be helping me any. So I honestly just put tucked it in the back of my mind and focused all my attention on Tyler and making sure that he was okay. Um, I met my current husband about a year after Troy passed away, and we dated for many years. And I got remarried. So he was a big part of Tyler's life too. That was a whole nother story. Another man coming into taking his dad's place was a difficult transition for all of us. But they really became close and created a very close bond. And in Tyler had started volunteering for our local sheriff's office, working on a history project with them. History was something he was really passionate about, and so was the sheriff's office. And so we we had Dell and I had gone zip lining with friends one day and on a Saturday, and I remember texting Tyler throughout the day, and we came home, that night, and I thought it was odd that he wasn't there because he was very regimented. He was either at his grandmother's house, at work, or at the sheriff's office, one of the three. And he did a lot of ride-alongs with the sheriff's office. So when we got home and his car wasn't parked on the curb where he parked it, I just assumed he was doing a ride along. And it was weird that he didn't tell us, but that's what I attributed it to. And I tried calling him and his phone kept going to voicemail. And I remember, like thinking, okay, this is so weird. And my husband was like, but he's a teenage boy. I'm sure he's fine. But as a mom, you kind of know, like, no, he doesn't ever turn his phone off, and he would never ignore my call. That's just not the relationship. We had a very, very close relationship. So we went to bed, and my husband fell right to sleep, but I couldn't go to sleep. And I kept texting him, and I kept trying to call his phone. And then I heard a knock on the door, like an incessant knock on the door. It was just like over and over. And I was trying to put on clothes to go down and open the door. And I was thinking, that Tyler had come home and came through the garage, but couldn't get in because maybe we had accidentally locked the door. So I was getting madder and madder the more he was pounding on the door. And I remember opening the door and seeing uniformed officers walking up the driveway. One was standing on the porch, and there were like a couple walking up our driveway. And I looked and I didn't see his car. And I thought, oh, okay, they're bringing him home from a ride along, or he did some activity. They're bringing him home. And then someone spoke to me, and I turned my head, and there was a gentleman in a suit and a bow tie standing there. And, they said, are you home alone? Can we come inside? And I'm getting emotional, and I don't get emotional anymore about this, so I apologize. He said, can we come inside? And I said, sure. My husband's here. What do you want? Like, where's Tyler? That's all I kept saying is, where's Tyler? Where's Tyler? Where's Tyler? And they were calling for my husband, but he wasn't hearing them. And one of them actually went upstairs and to our bedroom and got him. And they told us, when my husband came downstairs, they said, we're sorry, Tyler was involved in a car accident tonight, and he didn't make it. And it was something about that loss that changed everything for me. It was like losing my husband was one thing, but it really was. When people say, your grief journey is unique to the individual, I think it's also not only unique to the individual, but it's also unique to the individual and the specific loss, because losing my husband was different than, losing my son. And it was almost immediately I started getting this feeling like there's something more I need to know. There's something like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And I said that to my husband the morning after. Our house was flooded with people that night. And we came down the stairs the next morning, and he was behind me. And I turned around and said, I wish I could just fast forward a year, because I don't know how we're going to do this. I have no idea what I'm going to do with all this stuff that's inside of me. And so I kept feeling like my life wasn't enough. What I was doing in my life it had no purpose. And I felt this really strong desire to do something to honor Tyler. I felt like, I need to live big now because he is no longer here. His life was cut short. So I need to live for both of us. And I need to do something with purpose. And at the time I was doing outside sales for an energy company. I'd been there for 29. Well, when I walked away from that job, I had been there for 29 and a half years. So it was a little over 20 years when Tyler passed away. But it just wasn't, it didn't feel adequate. And I don't even know how to explain, but there was something that was just like nudging at me all the time. Like, you have to do something else. And living in Southern Maryland, the winters were cold and wet and brown and dreary, and it was depressing. And so I came in 2019. I just made a very quick decision that my job was no longer serving me. I had a greater purpose to honor Tyler in some way. Didn't even know what that way was, but I knew it wasn't what I was doing. So I walked away from my job at 29 and a half years. And my husband was about to come on a business trip to Florida. So I said, well, you know what? I'm going to go with you. And I came with him. And while we were here, I said, well, why can't we live here where the sun shines all the time? And literally 3 months later, we pulled up with the U-Haul, all of our belongings and our dogs, and have been here ever since. And it's been the best decision. But after we got here, I decided, I found myself reaching out to other moms when I saw people in our community had lost a child. It was like I became obsessed with just finding them and somehow getting a message to them, if it was on social media or whatever, and just saying you're not alone. Like, if you ever have something you want to say and you feel like you have no one to say it to, you can say it to me, because I didn't have that. And I felt like I was on an island by myself and nobody understood what I was going through. I didn't know anyone had lost a child. And my husband was my greatest supporter, always checking on me, always forcing me to talk about whatever was going on with me and paying close attention to my emotions. But you still feel like nobody understands, because there's these weird things that you think and experience that only another person who's lost a child would really get. And so I decided then that I wanted to pursue, supporting others who were going through the same type of loss. And really, there isn't a lot of, I have, there are a lot of therapists, there are a lot of counselors in the world, but many of them have told me personally that they don't learn about grief and they don't know a lot about grief. I have some that are my clients because they've suffered losses and they're not sure how to handle grief. And so I wanted to do something. I had gone to college and studied psychology, but I didn't learn about grief. And so I wanted to, I found a lady who was certifying others to be a grief coach. And so I went through her certification program. I read a lot of books and really educated myself on, what grief really is, how it really affects us both physically and, emotionally, and the things that we can do to help ourselves, which I had already been doing because I really, taught myself how to, regulate my nervous system and get myself grounded and help myself process my emotions. And so that's where this was born, out of a desire to honor my son in some way that for me has meaning. And there's nothing more motivating for me to get out of bed every day than to know that I come in here to my office and I'm doing something that is helping other people and making such an impact. Because when somebody tells me that something I said or something I did or a session that we had changed their life or changed the trajectory of their life, and I know that's because of Tyler, it's very fulfilling, and it's just something that I'm really passionate about doing.
That's amazing. First of all, I just want to say you are so brave and wonderfully beautiful to share that story with us and the listeners, because that's a very vulnerable story to actually share and to tell. And we're so thankful and grateful for you for sharing that story first off.
Tune in next week for part 2 from Friends from Wild Places.
You've been listening to Friends from Wild Places with Shireen Bueta. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast from the links to catch every episode and unleash your passion.